Okay, so now we are going to study the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, the Daf Yomi for Shabbos. And we're going to start on the very bottom of 17b. The Daf Yomi for Shabbos is Gittin Yud Ches. So Amalei Ravino. So the Gemara is going to try to figure out what was the benefit of the takana of the Chachamim that you have to write a date in the get. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the reason why you write a date in the get is so that the woman can evade the sin of adultery, because this way we're able to identify when exactly she was divorced. And according to Rava, the reason is, according to Reish Lakish, the reasoning is so that the husband can't deceptively steal her property, her fruits of her principal, by taking it even after the time where they were divorced, where he no longer has the right to take it. So Amalei Ravina or Rava. So Ravina says to Rava, Kasve, let's say the husband wrote the get, V'usve bekiste, and he left it in his pocket. He didn't give it to her because he was thinking the imafayis to fayis. He's thinking, well, maybe we'll make up, and so I won't divorce her, but I'll have it ready in case I need to. So therefore, what's going to be the halacha under that circumstance? I mean, to say, what benefit did the Chachamim get for writing the date of the get under these circumstances? Because she's not going to be divorced until the time where the get reaches her hand, and so therefore he could have compassion on her and say that she wasn't his wife at that time when she committed adultery. And also, under these circumstances, we could say that the woman might come and try to claim the assets from the people who purchased it from the husband by saying that she was still married to the husband at that point, even though still at that point she really had not yet been divorced, and she might claim she was divorced. So therefore, he has the get, but he left it in his pocket. What's going to be the advantage of this takana? So the Gemara says, people don't do that. People don't write a get and leave it in their possession. The expression is of the Gemara, a person doesn't anticipate the punishments for himself by writing his bill of divorce in advance. So Amalei Ravino Rav Ashi. So Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Gittin abami medina sayam. Let's say you have a get that comes from overseas. The Michtave Benisan Matu Atishrei. Let's say you have a get that you wrote overseas. The get was written in Nisan, but it didn't actually get to her until Tishrei because you're sending it from Japan. Well, again, how does it help? He's writing the get in Nisan, but it's not going to get to her until Tishrei, even though they sign it, but it's not delivered till later. So therefore, shouldn't you be able to use it to evade the adultery charge, or else she might come to claim the money improperly? So the Gemara says, Amarle, Hanu Kola Islu. No, those types of Gittin that come from overseas, everybody knows what's going on. And so therefore, if she comes to bring a proof from the time the get came into her hands, everybody will know that get was different because it came from overseas. So the Gemara is now going to take off this discussion and say the following. Imar, Be'emasai Mona will get. At what point do you start to count? The idea here, we're talking about here, says Rashi, is those 3 months that a woman needs to wait after she gets divorced. She needs to wait 3 months before she can get remarried. And that's called a period of havchana, to distinguish to who the new father is, whether it's the old husband or the new husband. So at what point do you start to count? So Rav says, Mishas Nesina. Rav says from the moment where the get was actually given to the woman. Shmuel says Mishas Kasi, but Shmuel says from the moment where the get was written, the date on the get. So Maskefar Rav Nassim Bar Shaya Shmuel. So according to Shmuel, says it's from the date that it was written. And then we could have a scenario where Yomer Shtei Nashim. Let's say there are two women, B'chatzar Achas, the man's married to two women who live in one courtyard. Zu Asura, Zu Muteras. So what's the scenario here? Let's say you have one person and he's going overseas and he gives two Gittin to his wife. And he says, and he gives them unto the day that he leaves, but one of them was written a month earlier. So according to Shmuel, one could get married after 2 months and the other one can get married after 3 months. So, but people are going to say, that they're both getting married on the same day. So they'll say that this one is prohibited and this one is permitted. People aren't going to understand this. And so that's the scenario that they're challenging Shmuel. So they're challenging Shmuel about this scenario. So that's the question that the Gemara raises. So if you're really going to count to 3 months from the time of the writing, in a case where there's two women who are married to one man and the man goes overseas and he gives them both Gittin on the same day right before he leaves, but the time of one was written a month before the other one, after 2 months, they'll see that one can get married and they'll say one is prohibited and one is permitted. It's not going to make sense to people. So therefore, what does the Gemara say? So therefore, Amar Abaye says that's not going to be a question. Each get there has a date on it. So they're going to say, well, this one, her date was a month earlier. So that's why she's allowed to get married earlier. Danya Kavasa de Rav. So says we have a brisa that supports Rav. Rav says you start counting from when the 3 months from when the get was given. And we have a Tanya Kavasi de Shmuel says you start counting from when the get was written, not when it was given. Tanya de Kavasi de Rav. We have a brisa that supports Rav. Let's say you send the get off to your wife. And the agent gets delayed on the road for 3 months. Once the get reaches her, she needs to wait 3 months. So this is clearly like Rav. We'll get Yashan in Chosheshin. And we're not concerned about a get Yashan because he didn't have seclusion with her. What does a get Yashan mean? Get Yashan literally means an old get. So later on 79b, we're going to learn that a person is not allowed to divorce his wife with something that's called a get yashan, with an old get. What's an old get? After you write the get, you then, before you actually give it to her, you're secluded with her before you write the get. That's going to disqualify the get. Why? Because we're concerned, maybe people will say that she was divorced and then she had her son with this man, and maybe and then maybe people will say that she was remarried at that time. And so therefore, so that will cause a problem with accusations of adultery. And so therefore, that's the concern. The concern about a get yashin will disqualify it. So in this case, we don't have to be concerned because he wasn't actually secluded with her. Tanya Kavasi de Shmuel, we also have a brisa which supports Shmuel. It says we count the 3 months at the time of the writing. Because we have the following case: somebody gives his get into a third party. Let's say he gives the get to a third party in order, he says, divorce her at the end of 3 months. And he says, I'm going on my road, I want you to divorce her after 3 months. And he says to him, he says, give it to her after 3 months. Once you gives it to her, there she can remarry immediately. So we see from again, we're not concerned about a get yashin, but we see from here in this scenario that it's from the time of the writing, because immediately when he gives it to her, she can get divorced. Rav Kahana v'Rav Papi v'Rav Ashi. So the Gemara says, Rav Kahana, Rav Papi, Rav Ashi, Avdim Mitshas Kasiva. So they paskin, and we wait 3 months from the time the get was written. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua, Avdim Mitshas Kasiva. They say from when the get was given. We also saw Mitshas Kasiva, and the halacha is from the time when it was written. So now the next question is, at what point we know that the sabbatical year cancels out all loans? So therefore, if you have a shtar chov, let's say you have a debt, and the sabbatical year should cancel it out. So the question is a ksuva, the ksuva is what the husband marries the woman, he gives her a document that he says he has a lien on his property to pay her. Is that going to be canceled out by the sabbatical year? So we say not necessarily, unless something happens. So Rav says, Misha Tifkom Vitiskov, that in order for the ksuva to be canceled out by the sabbatical year, she has to collect a part of the ksuva that shows she's going to collect it. That's called the pagima of the ksuva, Vitiskov, and then she transfers the rest of the debt into a loan. Now, how does she do that? And presumably she goes to a court. And so therefore it's no longer a ksuva, it's now a loan. And so therefore, at that point, the sabbatical year will cancel it. Shmuel Amar Pagama, Alpha Pishal Zakfa, or Zakfa Alpha Pishal Pagama. Shmuel says once she collects a part of the money, even though she doesn't transfer it into a loan, or she transfers it into a loan, even though nothing was collected from it, nevertheless, at that point, it's converted into a loan, and the Shemitah year cancels it. Tanya Kavasi the Rav, Tanya Kavasi the Shmuel. We have a brisa like Rav and a brisa like Shmuel. Tanya Kavasi the Rav. Meimas like Ksuva Mishamet. That's when there's the Ksuva canceled out by the sabbatical year. Misha Tifkom Vitiskov. Once you have the Ksuva impaired, and then he transfers it into a loan. Pagama vo zakva or zakva vo pagama. Ain't a Mishamet is such a Tifkom Vitiskov. You need both. And so that's a brisa clearly supporting Rav. Tanya Kavasi the Shmuel, we have a brisa supporting Shmuel. If we have a person who's an one, so let's say we have a person who assaults this virgin woman, now he has to pay 50 shkalim to her father. Or kanas, if somebody marries Nara Basula and he spreads bad words about her, he accused her of not being a virgin, he has to pay 100 selah to the father. Upitoy, somebody who seduces a basua, he needs to pay the father 50 silver kesef, unless he marries her. That's the halacha. So in all these cases, uksuva isha, and also if you have a ksuva that the husband dies, zak from the malva mishamtin. As long as you turn these debts into these money that you're owed into a debt, then the sabbatical year cancels it, even if you didn't take a portion of it. But otherwise, it's not canceled out. And at what point are they transferred into a loan? This really should have said this at the very beginning. From when you go to the court, from once you take them to the court, once you take them to the court, then it is like you're transferred into a loan. That Hamada Badin, standing around the court, is like converting this document, which is a document of the court, into a loan. So the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Ksuva Kamaisa Bezdin Dami. So Shmuel says, okay, we had said in our Mishnah that if you have a get that's written by day and signed that night, that the Rabbanan say it's disqualified. But what about the case of a ksuva? So Shmuel says the ksuva is kamaisa bezdin danya. It's like the stipulation of the court. And the stipulation of the court, you don't need a date on it. Ma maisa bezdin, just like a stipulation of the court, like for example, saying this person owes this person money, they could be written during the day and there's no problem of what's called a shtar muktam, that the document was written earlier, because it doesn't, the responsibility to pay doesn't come from the contract, it comes from the ruling. Just so to a ksuba is written during the day and signed at night. And so then the Gemara says, Ksubasi de Rav Chia bar Rav. Let's say the Ksuba of Rav Chia bar Rav. Ichtov b'yom me'irta mo'ela. It was written during the day and was signed at night. Have a Rava, some Rav was there. Rav was there when he saw this ksuba written during the day and signed the night. He didn't say anything. So it must be also like Shmuel that a ksuba can be written earlier than the actual the date on the ksuba could precede when it was actually took place. So the Gemara says no. Asukin ba'oso inyan. They were involved with the ksuba the whole day. The Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik l'shanu al shein asukim ba'oso inyan. When do we say this idea that the contracts that's written during the day and signed at night are disqualified? These predated contracts. And that's only when they're not involved in the matter the whole day of asukim ba'oso inyan kosher. But since they're involved in the whole matter the whole time because the witnesses are there, they're ready to sign, but they need to wait until he finishes the document, then we're going to say it's a valid, it's still kosher. We said in our mission, Rabbi Shimon was machshir by a predated get. Rabbi Shimon machshir, I'm a rabbi, my time with Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason why Rabbi Shimon says kosher? Because savar kivin shenasan einav l'garsha shuveng lo peros. So if she predates the get, if the get says they're divorced on Sunday, and then they actually get divorced on Monday, so at that point, and so therefore, if she wants to come and try and claim the money from the purchasers from the time when it was written, then she wouldn't have, she'd be allowed to, because from the moment he writes it, since he decides to divorce her at that point, he's given up the right to the dividends of her principal. Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. That's only if they get divorced that same immediately, i.e. the next day. If you want to write the get today and actually give it to her 10 days from now, whoa, that's not going to be okay. Why? We have to be concerned that maybe he appeased his wife during that time, and then he would have been secluded with her and had relations with her. And therefore, it will be a get yashin and be disqualified. And Rabbi Yochanan says, "Afil mikamad asar yamim imisa depayas kol isleil milsa." Rabbi Yochanan says, even from now until 10 days, the get mukdam, according to Rabbi Shimon, would be okay. We don't have to be concerned because if they actually would make up, there would be a call to the matter, because the neighbors would hear them fighting, and then when they're quiet, the neighbors would say, "Oh, everybody's getting along." In Mar, so the Gemara says, let's bring another dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish in this matter. In Mar, Amar la Sarah, let's say the man wants to embarrass his wife. He wants to give her the get in front of 10 people to make a whole tumult of it. He says to 10 people, Kisvu get lishti. He says to 10 people, write this get for my wife. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnai mishum eidin, v'kul mishum tanai. So if he says, write this get for my wife, then 2 of those people are witnesses. He intends that 2 of the people should sign as witnesses, and everybody else, the only reason why he wants them to sign is only to embarrass them in public. So he's making a condition for the get, that it will only be a get if all of them signed. So therefore, why are they signing? They're only signing because of the condition that he made. And so therefore, that's the reason why they have to sign. Whereas Reish Lakish Amar Kul Mishum Eidim, all the 10 have to be witnesses. Just like the 2 who signed the get, all 10 of them are witnesses on the get. So Echidami, what's the situation that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are arguing now? The law Amar Lu Kolchem, if he wouldn't say, all of you need to sign this get, he just said, write this get for my wife Vatanam, but we learned in the Mishnah on 66b. If he says to 10 people, write a get for my wife, but he doesn't specify all of you, you only need 1 to write it and then 2 to sign it. So he says all of you have to write this get, and under these circumstances, all of them need to sign. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, only 2 of them are signing as witnesses. The other are signing conditionally. And according to Reish Lakish, all 10 are signing as witnesses. Well, what's the difference? The difference is if 2 of the witnesses sign on the get on the day that it was written, and the other one is writing, the other witnesses sign from now until 10 days. The one who says it's just to be conditional, they're not witnesses, so that's Rabbi Yochanan's position. Kosher, he'll say there's no problem with the fact that the get was written early. So the get was written properly. So let's look at what the Rashi says. So the next Rashi. But what's Rabbi Yochanan saying? Rabbi Yochanan says that the signing of the 8 witnesses is only because Tanai, the stipulation of the husband, that's necessary for divorce. And it's not because of testimony. And so therefore it's kosher. Therefore it's going to be kosher. And we don't have to be concerned that it was a predated get. Even though only 2 signed on the day it was written, because the other signatures were not signatures for testimony. And so therefore, the get was signed properly on the day it was written. That's the date of the writing of the get. But the one who says that it was because of the testimony, we're going to say, also, it's going to be disqualified because the get was written one day and it was only signed many days later. And so therefore, it's not going to be a get until all of them sign on it. And when they signed on it, it was well after the time. And so therefore, it's a get muktam, which the rabbi says is disqualified. Inami, or alternatively, can go into nimta echamim karov apostle. If one of these 10 is found to be a relative or disqualified, so therefore, like we learned in Sanhedrin, that if a whole group comes before us and one of those people is disqualified, the whole group is disqualified. According to the one who says that they're not witnesses, it's kosher because they're not witnesses. But according to the one who says it's on account of the witnesses, apostle will be disqualified if one of them is a relative. Mara says, what about an additional case? Let's say one of those witnesses who signed was relative or disqualified. Amile, so under those circumstances, they say kosher, but amile pasul. Then some people say it's kosher and some say it's kosher. Amile kosher, one who say it's kosher is Tanayu, is because they say that the reason why they signed was it was part of the condition. And amile pasul, and the one who said, meaning to say, we're going to say that the testimony will be held with those who are proper to testify. But those who say it's disqualified, you might come to confuse it with contracts in general. Contracts in general, once they see that one person signed at the beginning and he was a relative, they'll say that he was signed for testimony. And if we're going to allow this get, they'll learn from here to allow others. There was a person who said to 10 people, write a get for my wife. 2 of those people signed that day. And the others signed over the next 10 days. So we want to know, is it a condition or are they witnesses? If it's witnesses, disqualified. If it's condition, it's kosher. Also coming to Rabbi Shimon Levi, Amar Lei. So Rabbi Shimon Levi says, he says you can rely on Rabbi Shimon. So even if it is witnesses, Rabbi Shimon says a get mukdam is early. The predated get is early, is kosher. But didn't we say that Reish Lakish says that Rabbi Shimon only says it's okay immediately, but from then to 10 days it's no good because we're concerned about a get yasham? Gemara says, yeah, but the Ayik Rabbi Yochanan's for your leg. But in this case, Rabbi Shimon Levi is asking like Rabbi Yochanan that we don't have to worry about get yasham in that case. Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan shnai mishum edim and kol mishum tanai. He says, yeah, but doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that the 2 are the witnesses and the rest are conditional? And so therefore, since he's saying the 2 are the witnesses and the rest are the conditional, then even the Rabbanan say it's kosher. So what do you even have to rely upon Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara says, and so therefore, Bahi, in this case, he holds Karish Lakish fear away. In this case, Rabbi Shimon Levi, and about that point, he holds like Karish Lakish, that he intended all of them would be witnesses. Okay, Shekoyach, we'll stop here the recording. Everybody should have a great Shabbos.